missing that.
Anyway, yeah. Good
question.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember where exactly we stopped. I think we stopped in the middle of this sugya. Did we do about crushing the ground, how the ground helps strengthen the walls? I think that's what we got up to, didn't we? We got up to Amar Rav, is that right?
Which stuff, sorry?
Chof base, Amad base. Yeah? I mean, basically, yeah, I think that's right. We got, I think we just did.
That's where my house will go.
Yeah, where's your house called Buffalo? Amarav, yes, I think that's what we got to. So let's just briefly recap for what we were talking about here. Basically, you have a scenario of a wall that is next. The Mishnah case discusses the case of a wall that's close to someone else's wall, and it has this cryptic language. You're not allowed to put another wall that close unless you have a 4 amos gap. Okay, and then it talks about windows. That basically, if someone has a window, you can't build a wall opposite the window, either because the window is you're going to darken their light, or because you're going to end up peeking into their private space, right? So there's certain rules around windows. We'll come back to the windows shortly. But the first case of the Mishnah was what the Gemora discussed first. And the Gemora basically asked a simple question. What does it mean? You've got a wall. He's got a wall, right? You can't put your wall too close. You have to have a farmer gap between, okay? So how was the first one there? Because the phrasing of the Mishnah is someone whose wall was close to his friend's wall, right? Remember that, yeah? Yeah, wall was close to his friend's wall. You can't put another wall nearby unless there's a farmer gap. Well, how did the first one get there? Right, that's right. So the Rav Yehuda says, the way you read the Mishnah is, if you're coming to come close, you can't come close unless you farmers away. Rava says that doesn't work because it says someone whose wall was next to his friend's wall. That's the scenario. So that doesn't work, right? It clearly was a wall in place. So Rava says like this, that the Mishnah means someone whose wall was next to his friend's wall at the correct distance of 4 amos. There was a 4 amma gap. Wall in your property, wall in his property, you leave a 4 amma gap between the two, okay? And it fell down, your wall. You're not allowed to put another wall up unless it also maintains the 4 amma distance. Why? Because of this thing called davsha, which means, that was what we got to do, davsha the hachamali, the people walking between the walls, okay, hardens the floor, the ground, which strengthens the walls. You need that space between walls. Okay, the walls in those days, it sounds like, didn't have very strong foundations, therefore the foundation of the wall could be sort of shaky if you didn't actually have people walking by and kind of compressing the earth. And therefore, you've got to leave that 4 amma gap between the walls at all times in order to make sure that the earth is sufficiently compressed in that way. That's what I was saying. Now, Rav qualifies this. He says that's only when the wall is surrounding, his wall is surrounding a garden. Because a garden is that people don't usually walk there inside the garden. A garden is generally understood as distinct from a chotzer. A garden is understood to be for viewing, for enjoyment, not for walking through, not for doing things in, right? And therefore, that's why the walking outside the wall was critical. But the wall around the chotzer, around the courtyard, if he's got if he wants to come close by, then you can be very close. Then it's not a problem, very close by, right? Because it doesn't matter. You with me? If you're talking about if his wall, right, is surrounding a chotzer, his chotzer. Now a chotzer is like an internal room for all intents and purposes, just without a roof, and therefore there's lots of walking going on next to the wall on his side, and it doesn't matter therefore if your wall doesn't have that 4 amma gap. That's what Rav says, because there's enough comparison. Rabbi Yoshi says no. Whether it's a garden wall around the garden, wall around the chotzer, if you're going to come close by, you cannot come right close by. You still have to leave the gap. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says there's no machlokas there, below pligi. Ha'be'er Yeshana, ha'be'er Chadosha. One is talking about an old city, and one is talking about a new city. Essentially, it depends. If it's a new city that hasn't had the wall, the ground floor, the ground hasn't been compressed, then even the wall around a chotzer, yeah, even if his wall surrounds his chotzer, yeah, there's a real need because it's all new buildings, yeah. There's a real need to compress it almost on both sides of the wall, and therefore you still have to make sure there's a gap. If it's an old city, so then the ground has sufficiently been compressed on his side. If it's a courtyard, if it's a chotzer that people are using, and therefore you don't have to worry about the 4 amma gap. Okay, makes sense. That's what the Gemora says. Okay, let's see Rashi on that. Those 3 lines. Elakos Rashi is the second narrow line. Elakos el gino. Because they're not crushing it from the inside, you have to crush it on the outside. Hasn't yet been pushed down. So the kosel chotzer also needs compressing the wall around the courtyard. Those are the 2 Rashis. Now we're going to go on to the second half of the Mishnah, from which we will ask a question on this halacha. So it's not the Mishnah says, hachalonos windows.
That's a question.
Yes.
There must be something in the Lashon of the Mishnah that excludes the thinking that there's 2 walls that are 90 degrees from each other. When we say kotel asorach lekotel.
We're assuming the 2 walls are parallel.
But why? Why couldn't you think that they're like that? In which case the whole thing makes no sense.
Well, because otherwise there wouldn't be a reason to have the gap.
The gap's in the third wall.
No, there's no third wall.
But if the 2 walls that the Mishnah is talking about is like that, then that explains the Lashon of the Mishnah.
What, when
there would be a third.
Yeah, but it would be a stranger. But a wall is next to another wall. But then,
you want to build a third wall.
Oh, I see. And you got to leave a gap there. No, but that still wouldn't. No, because if his wall, we're gonna need this in a minute anyway. Where's that board? The Dafyomi people. He uses it, doesn't he? You see, the point is that if what you're describing, yeah, is the one wall like that, yeah, and there's one wall like that, yeah, and that's his wall, and he's gonna put another wall there. That's the third wall.
Yeah.
But then that's only going to be a small space there, so we're not going to worry so much about compressing the ground. The assumption is that the 2 walls are parallel. This is a rubbish pen. 2 walls are parallel like that, and therefore, when you put your wall like that, the whole length of his wall, you'll see in a minute in the Gemora, because the Gemora is going to talk about walls that are right angles in a way of resolving a case. Hopefully something better will help us. We might need this again. Anyway, yeah, right. Yeah, okay, well, we'll see when we do this, carry on. So anyway, the Mishnah said like this. Okay, so the Mishnah is that was the Mishnah. Windows, if you're putting a wall next to someone's windows, you have to make sure that you leave 4 amos, right? That means the top of the wall must be 4 amos higher than the top of his windows. Okay.
So 4 amos in every direction.
Pretty much, yeah. So no, top of he has windows. He has windows. Probably, what do they use when everyone's half asleep in the morning? Do they find a pen that works? Okay. So he has window. Here, let's say this is his house. There must be one that works.
Is it not just actual run down?
What?
It's an actual run.
Is that the key? Is that the key? These are like.
Those are the permanent ones.
There's a classic. What? Those are the ones that work. The classic short situation. Yeah? When you need a pen, it's not there.
Have we dealt with the first question of the first wall?
Who?
Have we dealt with the question of the first wall?
What first wall?
What's the first wall?
Yes, because we're saying there was a wall there originally, and that wall, right, and that wall has now. I'm not going to multitasking, so it's hard to talk on this. Right, and that wall has gone, fallen down. Right. Okay, so then they rebuild the wall, and that wall also has to the same 4 amma gap. Okay, got it?
If it was a fresh wall?
It's a fresh wall. It doesn't make a difference. You have to make sure you always maintain a 4 amma gap, right?
The first one doesn't have the boundary.
Oh, the guy who first built the wall. Oh, the first person who built. No. So that's what you mentioned at the end of the share last time. Toras deals with that. and says that even according to Rava, who we learned at the beginning of the parak, who basically says that there's an onus on the first guy as well to take responsibility for what might come later if there's a second bill. It doesn't apply here because here the damage is more indirect, because the wall, all it does is reduces the capability, the space for people, the potential for people to walk through, and that is not the same as digging a bar, right, where you're going to actually, the digging motion or the water itself goes through to the other guy's property. So that, yeah, that's it, exactly. But here, this is the story. I've run this better work. Oh, okay, that'll do a bit better. You know, the problem is the board is rubbish. Let me try once more. David, we need to add this, yeah, to the list of things. What?
Yeah.
I think
We've got one video
useless.
Yeah.
Wow, absolutely useless.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna have to explain that. Sorry. Okay. Basically, what you have is you have a guy's windows. Yes, windows, right? And the windows are facing someone else's courtyard. Yeah, gentleman next door decides to build a wall. He has to make sure 3 things. Number 1, the wall must be at least 4 amos higher. The top of the wall 4 amos higher than the window. Why? We'll see in the Gemora, but basically, so someone can't look in. Otherwise, you can stand on top of the wall and see in the windows. So if it's 4 amos higher, you're not going to be able to see inside the window. Okay. You also have to make sure that there's at least 4 amos. It's 4 amos lower. If it's a low wall, you're going to make sure that the top of the wall, yes, there are 4 amos between the top of the wall and the other guy's window for the same reason. So no one stands on the top of the wall and jumps up. That's interesting, right? And jumps and looks inside the window. Yeah. Thirdly, you have to make sure that it is at a distance of at least 4 amos away from the window, so that he has light. Fair enough?
Yeah, the thing is, you could argue that if he's making the wall 4 amos higher than the window height, he's taking the light away.
No, not if there's a 4 amos gap. 4 amos is quite a significant distance. We discussed yesterday. It's easy the length of this table. So the assumption is that, you know, once you're that far away, you won't be completely blocking his light. Now, you might argue, well, why shouldn't he still have a claim to some other light? You know that's a different question. But the assumption is that will allow him, that prevents it becoming too dark, right? You could argue, well, if the wall's very, very high, it's not going to be enough, right? But yeah, that's what the Gemora says. And this Bryce, and the Bryce spells it out. Tony Allah was taught in the Mishnah, Mamalon above, you have to have 4 amos kadishli yotzes, it doesn't sort of squint down and look inside the other guy's windows. Milmatzon, low down, 4 amos below, shlo yamod v'yireh, so you shouldn't stand on top of the wall and look inside. And mikenegdon shlo yafel, and opposite it, you have to make sure that it's 4 amos gap so it doesn't darken his lights. Okay. Now the question is obvious. Tamo shlo yafel. What's the Mishnah worried about with the positioning of your wall opposite its window so you don't darken the lights? We're not worried about the people treading and strengthening, the need to strengthen the foundation of the wall, right? With the people walking through. We're not worried about that. Why not? Yeah, that's the problem. So the solution of the Gemara is, right, pretty similar to Martin's case. Yeah, it's bominat tzad. It's on the angle. It's on a right angle. If it comes on a right angle, yeah, then there's no davsha. There's no davsha, right? Because this is one, that's one, and you're building a wall like that. Yeah, that's his wall. Yeah, that's his wall, and you come along and put your wall there. Sorry, there's a gap there. So the gap, what? Yeah, so you've got to leave Daled Amos between there and there. That's his wall. And you've got to leave Daled Amos between the end of that wall, the end of your wall, and there. That tiny bit, we're not worried about compressing the ground. Okay? What we are worried about is someone being able, is if it's directly opposite a window, there's a window there, it's going to block out the light or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so that's the scenario. That's what the mission is talking about. The kamo, and how far away does it need to be? How far away does that wall be? In the right angle situation, how far away does it need to be? Amar of Yeva, Chamua, the Ashim Bar Nadbach, Rav Yeva, the father of Ashim Bar Nadbach, said, Mishmei Rav Nim Rav, Kimalei Rochav Chalon, the width of a window. The width of a window. Yeah. The car. Now there is a different. Yeah, there's a different girsa because there is a girsa that says v'kamo tefach. How much is it tefach? So it's either tefach or it's the width of a window, which might be a tefach as well. Okay, but basically it's much smaller. Okay, it's the gap that only needs to be. We're saying the gap needs to be only a tefach. The Gemora says, what do you mean? V'halo meitzes. You're going to be able to squint in. You're still going to be able to squint in since it's close by. Even if he raises the window higher, right? Since it's very close by, you're still going to be able to look in somehow. It's a bit difficult to understand why that should be the case, because if the angle, if the gap is smaller, the gap is only a tefach, there's less likelihood you're going to be able to look in.
Right, we talk about right angles.
Yes, we're talking about right angles. We're talking about right angles. We're talking about the wall. Can you see the picture? No. All right. Well, you've got that thing in there. But basically,
Green thing.
no, do it bigger. That's a wall. That's a wall. He has a window in his wall over there. Right? There's a window there. Okay? That's a window. You build a wall here in your property. That's your solid wall. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the right angles.
Blocks the window.
Pardon? Yeah, it blocks the window. Now, but we're saying, the Gemora says, how far away, what gap do you need to leave? A tefach, which is much less than 4 hours, only a tefach, right? That's what it says. You only have to leave a tefach. Now, the Gemora says, v'halo meitzitz. You're going to say, hold on a second, the Mishnah says 4 hours. We'll come back to the Mishnah in a minute, right? But the Gemora first asks on the how will that help? If the wall is so close, there's an assumption that you'll be able, even if it's much higher. Okay, this is the kind of bird's eye view, right? But even if that wall is much higher than the window, if it's so close, you'll still be able to squint into the window, which is a bit difficult to understand because if it's closer, from the top of the wall, which is a bit difficult. Well, that's the thing. If it's higher than 4 amas, it doesn't seem to make sense why it should be.
Why it should be true?
Yeah, why? Because just the angle is too sharp. That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, and yeah, and that's a difficulty with Rashi. So
Is Gemora talking about any type of angle or just an angle?
what do you mean?
Could it be considered that even if there's a slight opportunity to see, that's considered enough of a reason not to be able
No,
to?
but well, that's the point. Because you can still see. That's the problem.
That's fine.
Yeah, but the argument you could make is that the Gemara seems to be asking when it says v'halo meitzitz, the way Rashi understands it. Let's just see Rashi. Rashi says, we'll come back to the other Rashis before afterwards. The halo meitzitz, it's about halfway down. You have a halo meitzitz, you're going to squint. Given the somachu, since it's close by, because only a tefach, right? Afal pishu magbia yochalahatzit. So even though he lifts the wall very high, the wall is much higher than the window, you can squint inside the window. Now logically, if the gap is only a tefach, think about it. The angle, right? The angle is like this. You know, it's a tiny angle, right? So if your wall is that high, and his is there, and his window's there, you're not going to be able to see. The angle is too narrow, right? So Tosfos learns that I mean, he says it on the answer the Gemara gives, but it comes out of Tosfos that he understands it differently. That the concern is not that you're going to stand on the end of that. Sorry, Martin, you can't really see that. The end of that wall and squint downwards, but because the wall is at right angles, you can kind of sit there on the edge of the wall and you'll be able to see in. Maybe the window is slightly wider, something like that, right? Why? You'll be able to bend over there. You'll be able to sit there and look inside.
Not the angle, not the wall. Maybe to describe it, but that would seem to be too sharp.
No. But if it's
the wall seem to prohibit you from seeing inside.
Only if the wall completely obscures the window. If it doesn't, which is quite possible, because the window might be wider, yeah? So if the window is not, if you have a wider window, once you have a wall on right angles, it doesn't matter how high that wall is, anyone could kind of clamber on the end of it, get the angle right, and look inside the windows very easily. That's the concern, okay? That's how Tosfos seems to understand it, which seems to fit, if you like, better into the actual setup. Either way, the Gemara answers very simply, Amar of Zvid, B'madir es kosolo. The story is where you make the top of the wall in your property, on a slope. You make it on a slope, yeah, towards the windows. And therefore you can't stand on it, you can't lean on it, you can't do anything on top of the wall. Okay, you can't go anywhere. There's no possibility of looking in the other guy's windows from the top of the wall because the top of the wall is on a slope. It's sloped, right? It's not a standable on wall, if that makes sense. Okay. So the Gemora says, 1 second, how can you say you have to leave a tefach? We said 4 amos. We said 4 amos. Okay. Now you 1 second, you'll say to me, okay, maybe our Mishnah has 4 amos there because of the pathway for people treading the ground. Who says our Mishnah is worried about, who says maybe our Mishnah says 4 amos because of leaving a pathway for people to tread? Says Tosfos, no, you can't say that because it's clearly the concern is the windows in the Mishnah. It's not, what was that? Yeah, and it's worried about the windows. It's not worried about people walking. It says that the concern is about windows. That's the whole concern of the Mishnah. It's only worried because of windows. So the Gemara says, "Lo kasha, it's no problem." Okay, this is Martin's story, right? It depends if it's in one case where it's only a tefach, then that's where it's in one direction. In other words, the wall. There is one wall, say on one side of the window. You've got his window here, and there's one wall there. Whatever, one wall like that. Okay. When you need four amos, that's when you have a separate wall there. 2 walls.
But otherwise, the other guys will leave 4 amos. In which case, why is the first one?
Yeah. Well, I think we're assuming that he owns both walls, meaning both walls are in your property. This is your property, that's his property. So you're building 2 walls in your property. If you build 1 wall in your property, then it's okay to leave a tefach. But once you build 2 walls on either side of the window, then you have to leave 4 amos. Now, the reason for this is not entirely clear cut. Why should that be a difference? When Mukhi Yosef talks about this and explains why. 1 second, let me just find it. Yeah, because he says then it would dark. It's also a mafilo. So there would be a lot of, it would dark because there are 2 walls there on either side of the window. The gap between the end of those 2 walls and his window has to be 4 amos because that's a significant amount of light reduction if there's a wall on either side of the window. So at least that's the simplest way of understanding it, right? That's why you have to end up leaving 4 amos. Either way, what we've done is we've resolved it. The problem that we had with our case of Davsha, which was we said the reason is you have to leave a 4 amos gap is because why? In order to make sure there's a pathway for people to make the foundation solid so it doesn't weaken the wall, right? And we said, yeah. And we're saying, the mission doesn't say that. The mission talks about darkening light and all this type of thing. That's because fundamentally it's a totally different case. The Mishnah's case is a right angle case. Then we just went into details about whether it's a tefach or 4 amos, and that depends whether you've got 1 wall, 2 walls, etc., etc. But fundamentally, right, the first part of the Mishnah is talking about where 2 parallel walls. So we're worried there should be a walkway there to keep the ground strong. Second half of the Mishnah, which talks about other issues, such as window lights and things like that, is because it's a right angle. So there's no concern for that small bit about keeping the ground strong, but there are concerns about darkening his light and things like that. Okay, yeah. Let's just see Rashi on this. Okay, so where 1 second again. Yeah, it's about 5 lines is a narrow line. You have to lift up high enough. You shouldn't have to squint when he's leaning on his wall. The ashpil rosha, we shouldn't be able to. Shouldn't be able to sort of squint in when he's leaning on the wall. The ashpil rosha lowers his head. He looks through the windows and he's able to see in his friend's house. So he shouldn't be able to stand on the top of the wall and look in. You have to distance away, so you shouldn't darken it. It doesn't talk about it, doesn't tell you how much. That's what it doesn't say. It just says you have to be, the Brisa doesn't say how far. So Rashi here picks up on the fact that that the Brisa it doesn't, in the Brisa, it doesn't say how far. And that's why the Gemara's got this whole thing about maybe it's only a tefach. It asks how much, right? How far away do you have to be, right? The Brisa doesn't specify the distance when it talks about blocking out his lights. So he says, Tama shelo yafil, the Rashi carries on, b'sheyesh chalonos, when there's windows, you can't darken them. Just to keep the ground strong. When there's no windows, low, you're not worried about that. So we see we're not worried about crushing the ground. The Gemara says the case is minatzat she'ein hakosel mahacher mahalech la'orech kosel orishin. The second wall is not going the length of the first wall. It's on right angles. One is east to west, the other one is going to be north to south. The top of the wall, of the thickness of the wall, is opposite the window. You're not worried about the little bit at the end of the right angle where it faces the wall. You're not worried about the ground being trodden on that little gap. What you are worried about is darkening his lights. The Kamar Kadesh how much is it? Doesn't tell you how much. So we answered that it is a tefach, or at least this, whatever the width of a window, which we're assuming I think is the same as a tefach. We ask him to since it's close by, even though it's high up, he lifts the wall higher than the window. You can still squint in. That's what we explained. This is a bit of a difficult Rashi to understand. But Madir es kosolo. So we answer also rosh kosolo matoron. He makes the top of the wall a slope. You slope it towards the windows. You can't stand on it, can't lean on it. That's what you do, right? The case is you make the top of the wall a slope so that no one could do that. And that's why you're not able to see it. So then we ask, the Mishnah says 4 amas, not a tefach. So we said that's because two walls on either side of the window create a lot of darkness, and that's why you need 4 amas, right? If there are 2 walls here, one there and one there, there's got to be a 4 amma gap between the two to give him a bit of light. By the way, because the Mishnah, we've now explained the Mishnah as being a right angle scenario, it helps with your question. Well, it's still going to be dark. If you have a massive wall like a skyscraper next, that was the Bevis Marx problem, wasn't it? Right? They were going to build this massive skyscraper. Even if you leave 4 amas, right, you're still going to completely overshadow the thing. The case of the Mishnah is much easier to understand because if it's at right angles, well, if you have a 4 amma gap away between those 2 walls, and you've still got sufficient light coming from the sides and everything else, right? Because it's a right angle thing. It's not so bad. Tefach. The tefach would be enough if it's 1 wall on one side of the window. Yeah, one side of the window. Yeah. We've got one final question that we're going to pose on this rationale of having to have the 4 amma gap for people to crush the ground to walk through. So it's a Brisa, I think, or might be a Mishnah, which says that the window has to be the wall has to be distanced from the gutter 4 amas. So you should be able to stand up a ladder to clean out the gutter. So the story is that the bloke next to you has, as you do, a gutter on the end of his roof. And if you build a wall too close to the end of his roof, or whatever, right, he's not going to be able to get a ladder in there to clean out the gutter, which can create problems. If houses are built too close to each other, right? That's what the previous owners did to our house. they decided to expand the house to its maximum extent on either side, which is great internally. It's not so great if you ever want to get down the side of the house, because although it exists, it's like that wide. So theoretically, you could get a very skinny person down, but it's not such a great thing to do. I mean, okay, it makes sense if you want to maximize your land space, but you can understand the logic here of having to leave a space. There is access to either person or to their roof, right? So that's what happens here. That's what happens here. You've got to make sure you got this. Then what asked Tamim Mishum Sulam? Again, the same problem. The only concern is the ladder. Avul Mishum Dav Shalai. Because of the leaving space for people to walk through is not a problem. Why not? We're talking about a sloping gutter, or at least the roof is sloping, and therefore it comes a long way out beyond the wall of the house. Okay? You can go underneath the roof. There's plenty of space for people to walk underneath. Right, it's simple. Yeah, you can imagine it in your head. Look, it's basically this is the wall of the other guy's house, like this. You see that green line? We're only using green because the others are worse. Right. Anyway, this is there, and then the roof is like that. The roof is like that, and the roof is like this. This is the roof. It's a sloping roof. That's the gutter. So because of the walkway, you want to build your wall here. For the walkway is no problem because there's a large part of the roof that people can walk underneath. Yes, you need to leave 4 amas from the end of there until your wall as well. That might be 8 amas now. It doesn't matter. You only form so that you can get a ladder there. A ladder like that. Can you see? No, you can't see, but I can imagine. Anyway, that's it, right? That's the idea, right? Let's see Rashi. As a there's a large pipe and canala. It's like a canala shalonu. I don't exactly know what that old French word means. Every so often you get a little insight into Rashi's surroundings. There was a beautiful one. There was a learning Daf Yomi. There was a beautiful one in Moed Katan a few days ago. I think it was in Moed Katan. Maybe it was somewhere else. I think it was. He said something like, as he was describing some sort of, I don't know whether it was boats or something, or by the edge of a river. And he says, as we have on Nahar Rhinus, which is the Rhine. Like, and he's just describing, you go to the Rhine, the river, right, the local river, and you'll see these boats. Every so often you get a little insight into where Rashi actually lived. You know, we don't even know where Rashi's kever is. You know that. We know where he lived, right? Yeah, and you can go there, and there's a town square where there's a little, I don't know, kind of like statue or something that's some funny adornment in Rashi script, but it's just the approximate place where they think the original Beis Chaim was. It's a car park now. There's no original Beis Chaim, but there's no Rashi's kever. Yeah. Very sad. And it was a large pipe getting and it goes along the length of the wall on the wall. The river of the water of the roof falls into the gutter. It makes them flow to the ground. If the length of the wall goes on the faces of the guy's courtyard, and you've got this gutter on it, he has to be distanced away from it if he's going to build a wall next to it. On the whole length. So you can put up a ladder there on a slope, a decent slant. Lalo is supposed to ascend it, to clean it from clean his gutter from dirt and stones, etc. And open fall into him and restrict the flow of the water. That's the whole point, right? So we said, here's what we're dealing with. We're talking about a sloping gutter. That means you take us a gag the roof of the roof of the top of the roof effectively is ceiling of the roof literally. It shows it's sloping. The Yotz is the halam in a kosel, and it goes out away from the wall of Sofa Chotza into the koil maschila b'sofa tikra. Meshoch halam in a kosel Sofa Chotza, and the pipe, the gutter, is at the end of the roof, drawn away from the wall into the courtyard. If not for the need to be able to put a ladder up, you wouldn't need to distance from the ends of the roof because there's plenty of space to walk underneath the roof, right? So it's only because of the gutter you have to be 4 amas away. That's how we resolve it. So the conclusion of the Gemora is that the point of the first Mishnah is because of davsha, is because of people crushing the ground.
If you had ever had a flat roof, then you wouldn't have to be farmers.
Not for the ladder. Yeah, then you have to be farmers. No, then it would be farmers because of the walkway. Yeah, you wouldn't have to. It wouldn't come onto clearing the gutter out. Yeah. So yeah. So either way, and we certainly definitely do see from this mission the importance of all the restrictions that are there around restricting other people's light and everything else. And then you come on to the whole question, which we have briefly examined in the first paragraph, but we'll discuss a lot further, significantly more both in the next more actually, and also elsewhere, that the question of chazak, if you've got established usage to I don't know, darken someone's windows, for example, it's always been like that, right? Can you continue like that and things like that? That's a different question. Okay, so the next book is very, very fascinating and very important for the entire perek. It's one of the key questions about groma, indirect damage, and particularly we're going to focus now This is a Gemara which we did very briefly. I briefly showed you, but I said it was so critical to the whole parak. This particular little innocuous Gemara. It's very short between this Mishnah and the next Mishnah, and it basically deals with the question of the Machlokas Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon. If you remember that, which I said is the heart of this entire parak, the question of whether we say ala mazik la'achesatmo or ala nizik la'achesatmo. Yeah, this is the question of whether the person who is being damaged is the one who has to step away, or the person causing the damage. You'll tell me, obviously it's the person causing the damage, but not necessarily, because everyone agrees, yeah, that if you shoot a gun at someone else, you can't say, victim's problem. Don't blame the victim. You should have moved out of the way. You're obviously not, right? You shoot the gun, you're chayav. Yes, that's direct, right? But there are all sorts of others, a whole other load of other range of cases and scenarios where it doesn't work like that, right? It takes time, and you can make a very strong case that was your fault. You knew it was coming. You saw the train coming. You should have moved out of the way. You know, there are lots of time to do that. That's like, you know, this, and that's really the question. That's the key question. Okay. Now, this is the scenario. Part of this mission is actually the case we just mentioned, but the first part isn't. The mission is you have to distance a ladder from a dovecot 4 amos. Fascinating scenario. The next door neighbor, your next door neighbor has doves. He does that. He raises doves and he flies doves and whatever. And he has a dovecot. Now you've got to make sure that a ladder in your property must be at least 4 amos away from his dovecot. Because otherwise, there's this little animal called a nemia, which is a marten, they translate it as. It's like a little stoat or a weasel, something that likes juicy doves. He's going to run up the ladder and he's going to jump into the dovecot and he's going to eat the other guy's doves. So you've got to make sure you don't put that ladder there so that the other guy's doves don't get eaten. That's a responsibility you have. And then the second half is the one we just mentioned. Yeah, the wall. The wall, you wall from the gutter 4 amos to make sure that he can still stand up his ladder straight. So the second half of the Mishnah is not a problem. We've dealt with that already. Completely understandable. Access rights, basically. You know, if you put your wall too close, he won't be able to get to clean his gutter. But the first half is very interesting. Why? Why?
Because the damage is caused by something completely different.
Right, and a number of things have to happen in order for the damage to occur. So it's not the same as digging a bar, you know, where you dig the bar, it weakens the ground, you put water in your property and the water seeps through. This is like there are 3 stages, you know, put up the ladder, it has to be able, you have to, you know, assuming that the thing will be able to jump, will be there, will jump, will eat the dove, all this time, and yet you have a responsibility. The Rashi says, if he has a dovecot in his courtyard close to the wall, between the 2 courtyards, and the other guy sets up a ladder, or he wants to set up a ladder in his courtyard next to the wall, he has to distance it away from the dovecot 4 amos. So that the marten, this little animal, doesn't jump from the ladder to the dovecot. The Torah gets a yonim and it will kill the doves, and it's a little wild animal. That's what it is. It's a little thing, yeah.
So who has to ensure that the ladder is away from the dovecot?
You,
as in
the owner of the ladder.
On the other side, so your neighbour,
Yeah,
dove breeder.
that's right. That's it. Dove breeder. That's right. Yeah. Maybe.
It does, but I would assume that the entrance is locked.
Yeah, and he can take care of his own. Yeah, he'll take care of his own doves, and
It's a compensation thing.
what is compensation the same? What do you mean? Do you have to compensate?
The one I was saying you do. You obviously hire something.
Well, not necessarily. We have to see.
Right, so that's the question.
There's a difference between an obligation to distance something, and then that's not necessarily the same as saying if it happens, you will be liable.
That's what I'm saying. Isn't that really the important difference? It doesn't matter. Like, yes, obviously, like 3 steps removed, whatever it is, but you know, it's a nice thing to not do. But I think if I dig a bar and someone falls into it, I'm directly.
That's right.
Very clear damage.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the same here.
Right.
Not necessarily the same. Yeah.
Correct. So therefore,
yeah,
your moral obligation and the versus the the monetary outcome could
Yeah.
be two different things, and that's where the weighting is. The weighting isn't on the moral
Yes.
obligation.
Yes.
The weighting is on the monetary outcome.
Yeah, or it might be. I
Well, it
mean,
might be.
yes,
Yeah.
it's exactly what the Gemara is going to come on to. That's right where the Gemara is going to come on to. We're going to get to there through dealing with this opinion of Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, "Lema was decent to Rabbi Yossi." Let's say the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi, if it's Rabbi Yossi or Omar, Rabbi Yossi says later on, right? I showed you that Mishnah as well. This is one is digging in his property, he's planting in his property, and that's it. It's not your problem. The story of Rabbi Yossi was where you are planting a tree in your property. When you plant the tree, the other guy has a pit in his property. Over time, the roots will damage without question. They will, they will do that. They will damage his swimming pool, right? Doesn't matter. No problem. Rabbi Yossi says, you're digging in yours, you're planting in yours, he's digging in his. Shalom al Yisrael, not your problem, right? That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. And this is the reason. So the implication, and this Mishnah is it's actually a few time. We did mention it in the past, but the main Mishnah is on Chofhei Omid base. That's what he says. He says even if the pit came first, you don't have to chop your tree down because you're digging in his one, you're planting in yours, and it's not a problem. So
within 4 hours. That's what he's saying.
What do you mean with the farmers?
Sorry.
Well, it doesn't matter. There is an opinion in the Mishnah there that you have to leave a 25 amma gap of a tree from a bar because the roots will go that far and damage the other guy's bar. This doesn't matter. Not a problem. Even if the bar is there when you plant your tree, it's not a problem. Why? Because you're planting in your property, he's digging in his property, and and that's not a problem, right? It's not a problem. I know that sounds like a big chiddush, but the logic of Rabbi Yossi is the person who's being damaged to remove himself. It's not your problem. Yeah, you're doing it in your property. You don't have to worry about that. Now the Gemora says like this. Actually, let's see the first Rashi on this in the Mishnah on the Gemara. He argues at the end of our parak, someone who plants a tree next to a pit. Now Rashi has a problem. That's a kasha Rashi's asking. Rashi's saying like this. Hold on a second. All of a sudden, the Gemora asks that our Mishnah seems not to go like Rabbi Yossi. Why? Because Rabbi Yossi says that I can plant a tree in my property and I don't have to worry about the damage that my roots might cause. Says the Gemara, well, obviously that means Rabbi Yossi is going to dispute the din of this Mishnah because I can put up my ladder in my property, and the fact that there might be a little animal that will go up the ladder and jump into your property is not my problem. The Mishnah will not go like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi would say on this case, not a problem. You don't have to worry. Your ladder can be within 4 amos of his dovecot, and the fact that there might be something that might cause damage in the future, whatever, is just not my problem, right? That's what Rabbi Yossi would hold. Now, Rashi has a problem. What's Rashi's problem? Why didn't we ask this before? There are loads of other Mishnayos here, which are very similar, okay? Like the previous case.
Walls with windows, where it's not my problem.
Walls with windows. No, well, windows is a different thing because that's not hezek. Well, it's not hezek. That's different because not damage, right? He says it's hezek. Yeah, potentially, yes. It's how it's damaged like that. But take the one we just said about the need to leave a gap for people to strengthen the wall. Rabbi Yossi presumably would dispute that as well and would say, "What's the problem? It's not my problem, right? You don't have to worry." Yeah? So Rashi says, "You're right. There are lots of things don't go like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi's opinion later on, and lots of things don't go like him. We're suggesting, let's say, even this case of the ladder, also this one is not like Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara chooses to ask it here and to put it here. Let's say even this is not like Rabbi Yossi, but it's true there are others not like Rabbi Yossi as well. Says Tosfos, no, he says it's not true. It's not true because the Gemara specifically sets out here, which implies that the others do follow Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara wouldn't ask it here unless it was only this one which wasn't like him, but the others were.
That's a guess that he's saying from knowledge.
Well, Well, we'll pause it there. We'll see the Gemara's answer, and then we'll come back to how Tosfos resolves it. What? No, so Tosfos has, and again, this is all, he doesn't spell this out clearly, but it's quite clear where he's going with this. Tosfos has a massive problem. He doesn't ask as a question, Rashi, but it seems to be obvious that's what his question is that it's very difficult to say that the Gemara had the option of asking this question multiple times, but just chose to ask it now. On the contrary, the straightforward way of learning this Gemara is this is the only one that's not like him. The others are, right? And therefore you have to understand why. So just hold that in your mind for a second. What's the answer the Gemara gives? Afilu Tema Rabbi Yossi, says the Gemara. You know what? This mission got Rabbi Yossi as well. Ha'amar Ravashi said, Ki havinon be Rav Kana. When we were in the house of Rav Kana, Hava Omar, he would say, Modi Rabbi Yossi begeiri didei. Rabbi Yossi agrees, and we mentioned this, we explained this before, when it's his own arrows, like the case of the gun. If you're shooting an arrow at someone, it's direct damage happening now from your action, then you're liable. You can't say Al-Nizi. You can't say the guy should have dodged the arrow. Okay? Hachanami here as well, this case could be the same. Zimnin sometimes, to Bahadi de Manachle, right? Whilst he puts the ladder up, Yosfa Bachar. It's sitting in a hole. Rashi doesn't seem to have those two words. Whatever. The little marten, little animal, is sitting there waiting for the ladder. The koftza, and it jumps at that moment. So it's immediate and direct. You put the ladder there, and that's like shooting an arrow at the doves. Because the little animal is waiting for the ladder, sees it, jumps on it into the dovecot. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi will agree, but Geirei delay. Look at Rashi, Geirei delay. What is Geirei delay? Arrows that come directly from the physical person of the Baal Habayis. Very important Rashi. That's the definition of Geirei delay, his arrows. It's where an action that you cause now immediately damage the other person. Because otherwise you're going to ask me, well, it's all like that, isn't it? You know, with the roots of the tree, you plant your tree, and the only difference is time. It's going to take 15 years, but it's your arrow. It's just a very slow traveling arrow. Am I right? That's what the roots is, a very, very slow traveling arrow. That's why Rashi says it's different. It's something which comes right now from you towards him. You know, there's a fascinating question as to how far that goes. Let's say you shoot an arrow, and when you shoot the arrow, the other guy is holding up a bulletproof vest, an arrow-proof vest, at the moment you shoot the arrow. And then he drops it. Are you chayav? According to Rabbi Yossi.
No.
No. Yeah. No. Because when you shoot the arrow,
My action. My
what?
action is I shot the arrow in the arrow.
After
in
you
that
did
second.
your action.
So the truth is, it's true that it's not so right to say no. I tell you what it is. No, what was that? Don't try. No. There's another problem with it. And basically, the scenario that I just described to you of shooting an arrow, and at the moment you shoot the arrow, the other guy is holding up the bulletproof vest, has a classic name in halacha. It's called groma. That is what groma. That's groma. It's indirect damage, right? It's indirect, right? It's not. There's another thing that has to happen. Yeah. Instead of having A causing B, right? A causes C. If B happens, that's what groma is, right? That's indirect. Now, groma is massively important, obviously, in Shabbos, for example, right? There are all sorts of ways where groma is an important question, right? It's where it's not that your action causes something else, your action is indirectly causing something else, indirectly causing his death, because the thing has to be removed for it to happen, right? Now, there's a big question as to what groma exactly is, but the Gemara asks that question now. The Gemara says, "V'ha groma hu." Well, it's fine. Okay, Geri delay. Fine. It's his arrow. It's direct, coming directly from the Balabayas, but it's groma. It's indirect. It's not. It's causation. That's really what the word means more than indirect. It's causatory. Causatory. Why? Because you put the ladder there, and by placing the ladder there, the little animal.
The ladder placement does not directly lead to the death of the
That's right. But the ladder placement facilitates the little animal jumping up. From here you see groma b'nezikin osa. That indirect causation of damage in damages is awesome. This is a massively important Gemara. This is a really, really fundamental Gemara in Hilchos Nezikin, right? You see from here, the trajectory here is, we wanted to say that it doesn't go to Rabbi Yossi. It can go to Rabbi Yossi because it could be that the little animal was waiting there. So it is direct. It's his thing. But hold on a second, it's only indirect. Now that will seem to be a question on everyone, whether it's Rabbi Yossi or the Rabbon. Why should you be chayav? It's groma. It's not direct, right? On that, the Gemara answers, you see from here, groma ben Ezekin also. Says Rashi. Va'afilu, says Rashi. David, this Rashi is your point. Va'afilu leman da'omar. I think it's leman da'omar. 1 second. Where is it? It's the even according to the one who says, that's right. There's a problem with the Bach, the letters are out of order. Even according to the one in Bava Kama, who doesn't judge cases of indirect damage, Garmi is more direct than Groma. Right, it gets a bit complicated. There's causation which is direct, and there's causation which is slightly less direct. Slightly more direct is Garmi. Anyway, even the one who says that you don't judge such cases, here Rashi seems to mix them up together. A potter milashale, and you're exempt from payments. Even one who says you're not enough to pay, also ligro. You're not allowed to do it. You can't cause it. You may not go to jail, right, for causing injury to the guy you shot the arrow at while he's holding the vest, the bulletproof vest. But you're not allowed to do it. Also ligro. And if you are going to establish a situation which, by virtue of the fact that it's there, is going to indirectly lead to damage to someone else, the other one can turn and say, excuse me, can you stop, please? You're not allowed to do that. That's exactly the point you were making, right? There's a distinction between, are you liable? We can't make you liable if it's groma, because it's not you, right? It's not you. There's a case in the Gemora, there's a case somewhere in the Gemora where, that's right, there's a guy, you tie up a guy, I think it's like this. You tie up, I'm trying to remember how it works. There's a guy tied up. I don't know if you tie him up. I think you tie him up. Yeah, you tie him up, and then you release a dam of water and he drowns. It does sound like murder. I don't think it's culpable murder though.
No, but it's like so that's quite an extreme thing. It's like tying the burning torch to a cow, right? It goes on its way and ends up burning a field.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, you knew, even though
your
action.
Right. So this is it. Right. I mean,
No, there's an inevitability
about what?
about the case of the dam.
Is there?
Which because he's in the path of the dam, and the water, there's so much water, he's inevitably going to drown because he can't move. Whereas with the ladder, there's not an inevitability.
The likelihood,
Yeah.
But not an inevitability, because you've still got the will of the.
Okay, so let me tell you this case. Tosus brings all the cases. A fascinating Tosus here. It would be nice to see the Tosus. I haven't got time. It's quite a long Tosus, but it's really worthwhile. You throw something off the roof. Okay, you run. It's a very high. You somehow get downstairs before, and when you throw it off the roof, there are cushions there. It's not going to smash. But you somehow manage to run downstairs, beat it, and it's unlikely in terms of its falling trajectory. Okay, and you remove the cushions. Are you chayav for smashing the guy's china? When you threw it, nothing could happen. Nothing.
At the time that you threw
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't.
Yeah, and that's right.
I know you'd love to connect. I know you were responsible.
Yeah, I feel who is Potter. You're Potter. One bother comma, you're Potter.
Why is it you?
I feel it's a chiddush. Even you. Even if you did both halves. Even if you did both halves. You both threw it and you removed it. You're Potter.
That's for the sheer genius of getting them.
Yes, you get reward for that.
You deserve it.
You set fire to a field.
Yeah. So all these kids. This way, it's nice to see this Tosfos. This Tosfos is a journey through Gemora. Through Gemora. This Tosfos is a journey. I don't want to do it when you're half asleep. We'll do it. I'm not joking. We'll do it maybe at the beginning of next time. What? No. We'll do it when we. I think we'll start the share next time with this Tosfos.
Yeah.
You can see this Tosfos Oso Meres. This is a beautiful Tosfos. It's like a journey through the whole of Shas. where he brings together pretty much all the cases, or a lot of them, that are similar to this, Groma, and he asks, is it the case that you are, because what we're establishing in the Gemara here is that you're not liable, but it's forbidden, okay? But it's osa. But the problem is there are implications from the Gemara elsewhere, I think, that that's not the case, that there is liability. There is some liability for Groma. So it's not entirely clear cut, right? So we'll have to see that. But either way, the way the Gemara has resolved the problem is by saying, this Mishnah go like Rabbi Yossi as well. Because Gary delay, Rabbi Yossi agrees if you shoot the arrow. If you shoot the arrow and it hits the other, if you shoot the arrow and it directly causes it, you're going to be like, what do you mean directly? So we said, okay, fine. And we said that the case where the animal's there, so it's going to happen straight away, right? Problem is, it's still indirect. You're putting the ladder up and that's not, you're causing something to happen. So on that we answer, that's okay, so you're not chayav. But it's still, you're not allowed to do it, and that's why he can stop you. You got to distance the ladder from the dovecot to stop that happening. Now I mentioned to you that Tosfos says, how come that the Gemara only asks the question here? Why not ask the question on the other Mishnahs? Okay, so if you look at the little Tosfos, not the big one, don't worry, the little one, Leimatznan, where it says Leima, it's the fourth one from the end. Leimatznan stoma de Rabbi Yossi, Pirish Rabbeinu Chanana, Mitakam achot tvei Leima de Rabbi Yossi. From the fact that it says it here more, that it's not like Rabbi Yossi, below Kama Mishnayos Tilael, it doesn't ask this question on other Mishnayos, Mashma de Kulu Osik Rabbi Yossi. It implies that they all do go like Rabbi Yossi, or Vikulu Geri delay. You have to say that all of the other Mishnayos, they're all considered to be his own arrow, shooting an arrow. Rabbi Yossi says you're liable. Why? Because the damage is there right at that time. Right at that time. The damage is there right at that moment. For example, we had a mission where you put an oven inside your house and you got to leave a certain space above the top of the oven. If you don't, it might, the smoke or the fumes are going to damage the guy upstairs. In all of those cases, right? The implication is that happens then, and therefore Rabbi Yossi would agree. That's why the Mishnah didn't ask it when any other Mishnayos. Rabbi Yossi only disputed the case of the tree with the roots of the tree. Yeah, but yeah, and that's why maybe because it takes so long. Maybe it's not entirely clear why it's that case. Maybe because of the length of time. But even the case of the treading, where you've got to flatten the ground, you have to say Rabbi Yossi agrees there as well, right? That it's considered to be you damaging it. You're like shooting an arrow because it happens straight away. Seems to be that the time thing is the issue. You understand? When you shoot when the Rabbi Yossi agrees, Begeri delay. Rabbi Yossi agrees, if you shoot an arrow, then you're liable. You can't say, you should have moved out of the way. And that we're saying that applies in any case where the damage can happen straight away, effectively. Yeah, like for example, where people won't walk there and they won't be able to strengthen the ground. That can happen immediately. That problem, right? Whereas the tree roots takes many years, takes a long time. Okay. But here we're dealing with this other issue of Gromel. So next time in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll return to the subject of Gromel, because it's very fascinating. And we'll see that Tosfos. Okay. Have a good evening.
Sorry, so Rabbi Yossi is saying the tree roots